In this video, we are going to create a memory game using React. Basically, for a few moments, you will get to see the images. After that, the cards will flip. And now you have to find the images in pairs. So if I click on this one, this is a Node.js image. And if I click on this one, this is also Node.js image. So this is a match. But if I click on this one, this is a HTML image, and then click on this one, so they are not a pair. So they were highlighted in red, and after a few moments they were flipped back. So this is what we are going to be creating. We will be using React to implement the game logic, and we are also going to be using CSS grid to create this grid. So I hope you're really excited for this. So like the video and subscribe now if you haven't already, and let's get started. Okay, so let me open up my other VS Code tab, so this one, and here we're going to open up our terminal. So new terminal, and we're going to run npx create react app. And the name of our React app can be memory game. Hit enter and wait for the installation to finish. Okay, so our installation is now complete, so we can cd into memory game, and then we can run npm start, and this will start our development server. Now I already have a server running on localhost :3000, so it is asking us if we want to use some other port. So we are going to say y for yes. And this started our server at localhost :3001. In your case, it will simply start at localhost :3000. Okay, now in our project, we have this source folder. We'll be mostly working on this source folder. Here, let's delete all the files that we don't need. Okay, so we have deleted all the files except app.js, index.css, and index.js. Okay, now let's go to our index.js, and here we're going to delete this line. We don't need the report web vital. And we can delete these lines as well, and this should be all for the index.js. And then in the app.js, we don't want a logo or app.css, so we're going to delete them. And for now we can simply say hello world. Save. Now we have a simple app that only says hello world. Okay, now let's go to our index.css and let's remove all of them. And first thing we're going to do is target everything, and we're going to say margin to 0 and padding to 0. So margin 0, and we can also say padding to 0. Save, and this is how they look. Let's also change the font family. So we're going to say body, and the font family, so font dash family. You can use any font you want. Save. Okay, now in our app.js, here we're going to use a h1. So h1. And our h1 will say memory game react. So let's copy this, Ctrl C, and we can paste it, Ctrl V, and then we're going to have a container. So let's create that container. So we're going to say div, and the class name will be container. So class name equals to container. Save. This is how they look like. So let's style them. So let's go to our index.css. Let's change the background color of our body. So let's click on inspect. And we can simply copy this code here, so Ctrl C, and we're going to say body to have a background color. We're going to say body will have a background color of the color we just copied. So let me paste it, Ctrl V, save, and now we have this color. We're also going to say our body will have a display of flex. So we're going to say display of flex. We're also going to say justify content to center and align items to also center. Like so. Save it. Now this is centered horizontally but not vertically, so we're going to say our HTML and body, both of them should have a height of 100%, like so. Save, and now it is centered both horizontally and vertically. Now let's target our container. So we're going to say that container, let's say this will have a height of 700 pixel, and the width can also be 700 pixel. Save, just so that we can see it. Let's say background color of red. So this is our container. Let's also target our h1. So we're going to say h1, this should have a text align of center, so text align center. Save, and now the text is in the center. Let's also say margin bottom of, let's say 1 em. So 1 em. Save, and now we have this little bit of margin, and now we're going to create this grid. So for that I'm going to create a new component. So in the source folder I'm going to create a new folder called components, and inside the components folder I'm going to create a new component file called cards.js. Save, and here we have to create a function. So we're going to create a function. We're going to call it cards, and for now this can return a simple paragraph text. So let's say p, like so. Save it, and we have to export it. So we're going to say export default cards. So export default cards, like so. Save it. Now go to our app component, and here we can import our cards. So we're going to say import cards from ./components /cards, like so. So now let's say inside this container, actually we won't have container here, let's comment it out. So control /, instead we're going to just have our cards component. Save, and if we refresh, as you can see, we have this cards component here. Okay, now in the cards component, we're going to have an array. Each element will contain an object containing the information about our image and other stuff. So let's create that. So for that, we're going to use the useState hook. So we're going to say import. We're going to import useState. So useState from React, and then we're going to say, let's call it items. So we're going to say const items, and set items equals to useState, and this will be an array. So let me just paste the array I already have, and then I'll explain. So control V. So you'll see I have an array of objects. So what are those? So in our finished project we have a 1 2 3 4 and 1 2 3 4. So 4 by 4 grid. So we need to have 4 times 4 equals to 16 items in total. Now we also have 16 items in our array. Now you'll see we have two same object here. That is because we need to have two same type of card here. That is why we're saying the image, same stat. So the stat basically indicates in what stat our cards are in. So they can be highlighted in green, they can be flipped in this direction, they can be highlighted in red. So by default the stat will be nothing, and we'll be updating our stat later. And then we have an image. So for all the object we have an image, and then we'll also see ID. So two cards with same image will also have same ID. We will be using this ID to determine if we have selected the same pair of cards. So we have this 16 object here. So now we can look through them. First, from the app component, let me just copy this, control C, and we can delete it from here, we don't need it. Save and go to our cards. Here we're first going to just return that. Let me fix the indentation, and then we can loop through our items. So we're going to say items.map. So items.map will get our item, and then we're going to return some HTML here. Now instead of just returning a HTML here, let's just create a component. So we're going to create a new component, and this one, well, we're going to call it card.js. So we have a component called cards that will contain all the cards, and then we're creating a component for individual cards. So card.js. So inside that we're going to create a function. Let's call it card, and for now let's just return, let's use a paragraph text, and here we can say card. Save. Let's go to our cards.js, and here we're going to import our cards component. So we're going to say import card from ./components. So ./components. Actually it should be ./cards, since we are already in this component folder. If we save it, we should get an error. As you can see, we do have an error. Let's see what is that. We're going to use the card here, so we are going to say card, and we have to close the parenthesis. Save. Okay, now it is saying that the card does not contain a default export. So in the card component we have to export it. So we are going to say export default, and we are going to export our card, like so. Save. And now let's go back to our project, and you'll see we have 16 card component rendered. So now let's style them. So in our app.css, actually first let's target our card. So the card component, let's return a div instead. So we're going to say div, and the class name will be card. Let's say card. Save. Now it looks the same, but now let's go to our CSS and let's copy this class, Ctrl C, and we're going to paste it, Ctrl V. Let's say this will have a background color of white, so background color of #FFF. Save. And now they have this white background color, but now we want to make a 4x4 grid. So for that we are going to say our container will have a display of grid. So display equals to grid, and we are going to say grid template columns. We are going to say repeat 4 and 1 fr, and we are going to do the same for our grid template rows. Save. And now you'll see we have this 4x4 grid. So we can also say they will have some gaps. So we're going to say gap equals to, let's say, 1 em. Save. And now we have this gap here also. Okay, now let's target our cards, and here we're going to say the card will have a display of flex. So display flex, and we're also going to say justify content to center and align items to center. So now the text will be centered like so. Okay, let's also say they will have some border radius. So we're going to say border radius of, let's say, 5 pixel. And 5 pixels should be good enough, but now we can delete this red color, red background, save, and this is looking pretty close to what we had in our finished project. So now instead of just saying card, we want to use the image, this image here. So first thing we're going to do is pass the item as its prop. So we're going to say item equals to, and we're going to pass the item, so item. And now in our card component we're going to also receive our item. And one thing is we should use a key here. That is because we are using a loop. Let's also get the index as our key. So we're going to receive index. And here we can simply say key equals to our index. Save. Okay, now in our card component, instead of just saying card, we can use the image tag here. So we're going to say img. And the source will be item.image, and the alt we can leave it empty. We don't need the alt tag. Save. And we can't see any image. That is because we don't have any image in our project. So let me just get the images that I already have. So let me just drag this image folder in our project. So as you can see in my public folder, I have added this image folder, and inside this img folder we have a lot of image. Those are this image. And I'll leave the link to the finished project in the video description, so you'll be able to get all the files from there. Okay, so now if you save it, as you can see, now we have all the images rendered, but they are very big. So let's style them. So in our index.css, let's also target the image inside the card. So we're going to say .card and the image inside that. So they will have a, let's say, a max width. So max dash width of max width will be, let's say, 80%, and the max height can be 80% as well. So max height of 80%. Save. And now they're looking very similar to what we had in our project. Okay, it looks like our Angular image is not rendered. Let's see why is that. In our card component we are calling it angular.svg, but here we have this angular.png. okay, so we have to just say png here. Save. And now all the images are being rendered. But one thing is, all of our images are paired in order. So we have HTML next to HTML, but we want to randomize them. So we're going to say this array.sort. So sort, and then we can simply say math.random minus 0.05. If we were to now save it, as you can see, every time we refresh, our array is in different order. So our array is being shuffled. So now this is less predictable. Okay, now in our index.cs, by default, our card will be flipped by 180 degrees. So we're going to say transform equals to rotate y. So rotate y. And this will be, let's say, 180 degree. Save. So now this is rotated in 180 degrees. So all the images is flipped. So we're also going to say our images will have a transform. So transform of scale, and this will be scale to, let's say, 0. So we won't be able to see our image. Now we don't want the images to be hidden initially. We should be able to see our images for a few seconds. So if you refresh our finished project, as you can see, for a few seconds we do see our images, then they get flipped. So let's do that. So we're going to say they will have a animation. So we're going to say animation, and the animation we can call it, let's say, hide card, and let's say the duration will be 2 seconds, and this will be linear. So we're going to say linear. Save. And now let's create that animation. So we're going to say add keyframes. So at keyframes we are going to call it hide card. So at 0% the rotate y will be 0 degree, and then in 100% the rotation will be 180 degree. So if we save it and now refresh, as you can see, they get rotated. So we're going to add animation to our image as well. So we're going to say animation equals to, we're going to call it hide image. So hide image. Let's create that animation also. So we're going to say add keyframes. We're going to call it hide image. At 0% the scale will be 1, and at 100% the scale will be 0. Save it. And now if we refresh, as you can see, they are rotating like this. But now instead of just saying 0 and 100, we're going to say 0 to 70 here, and then 0 to 70 here as well. So 0 to 70%. Save and refresh. We see our card for a few moments, and then they get rotated. So this is what we wanted. Okay, let's also add some transition. We'll be needing the transition later. So we're going to say transition to transform, and the transition can be 0.5 seconds, and we're going to copy this, Ctrl C, and we're going to paste it, Ctrl V. This will be useful later when we add or remove class in our JavaScript. Save. Okay, this should be all for our HTML and CSS. So now we can move to our main game logic in our React component, so in the card component. So we also want to do something when this is clicked, so we need to have a click event listener on our card. So we're going to create a function, so let's call it function. We can call it, let's say, handle click, and this will receive the ID. And for now, let's just alert our ID. So here we're going to say alert, and we can alert our ID. Save. And then we in our card component, we're also going to pass this handle click function. So we're going to copy this, Ctrl C, and we can say handle click equals to the handle click function, Ctrl V. And since this handle click function also takes an ID, we also need to pass the ID. So we're going to say ID equals to, the ID will be simply our index. Save. So now in our card component, we're also going to be receiving our ID, and we're going to be receiving the handle click function. So here we can say on click, so on click, and when it is click, we are going to run this single liner function. This will call the handle click function, and this will pass the ID. So the ID we receive. Save. Click on refresh. Let's try to click on a card, and it says 1. If you click on this one, this says 15. If you click on this one, this says 13. So the handle click function is working. So now what we want to do is, if you click on this, we want to save it as our previous element. Then if we click on the other element, we want to check its ID is same as the previous element we clicked. So let's see how we can do that. So first we are going to create a new state. So we're going to say const prev for previously selected element. So, and we're going to say set prev. By default it will be, let's say, -1. So the prev will simply be storing the ID of the previously clicked item. So by default we haven't clicked any item, so the ID will be -1. If we, for example, click on this, the prev should be set to 0 because the ID of this is 0. If you click on it, it says 0, and ID of this will be 15, like so. Now before doing anything with the prev, I want to check something. So for example, if this one stats was active, this one should be flipped. So this card should have been flipped. And if this one had a class of, let's say, correct, then this one should be flipped and the background color of this should be green. And if this one, for example, had a stat of wrong, for example, this one should have been flipped and the background color of this one should have been green. So let's see how we can do that. So now in our card component, we're going to have a variable called class. So we're going to say const item class. So item class equals to, and here we're going to say if item stat, so item.stat, if the item stat is not empty, in that case we can say the class will be active plus stat. So plus stat item.stat. Save. Let me close the sidebar. So item.stat, otherwise this will be an empty string. And here, instead of just having a static string, we're going to have a dynamic string. So we're going to say card, and we're going to say plus, and then we're going to say item class. So item class. Save, and let's inspect. Let's click on this one, click on inspect. So as you can see, this one has a class of active and wrong, this one has a class of active and correct. So these classes are being applied. So now in our CSS, let's go to our index.css, and let's say when our card has a class of active, so .card.active, when they have a class of active, the transform will be rotate 0. And we're also going to say .card.active, so .card.active, and then the image, and the image will also have a scale of 1. Save it and click on refresh, and let me close this. As you can see, some elements are flipped by default. Okay, now let's also target the wrong class. So we're going to say .card.wrong. So when the card has a class of wrong, they will have a red background color. So we're going to say background color of, let's choose some red color, and let's try this. Save, and this is the red color that we have. Let's also add the correct color. So we're going to say .card.correct. In that case, we'll have some green background color. Save it. So now this one is green by default. Let me make it a little bit lighter. Save, and yeah, this should be good enough. So now the stat of our card will be corresponding to the stat of this object. So let's delete them, we don't need them anymore. And for now, again, just for testing purpose, we can say when the handle click function is ran, we can say items, so items, and we can select the item at that index, so the ID, we can say the stat will be active, so active. Okay, we also have to say set state, so we're going to say set items, and we're going to set the items to our new items. So we're going to use the spread operator here, save, click on refresh. So now if we click on anything, as you can see, they get flipped like this. Instead of doing this, we're going to say if prev equals to -1. So if we haven't had any items clicked previously, we're simply going to say set prev to the ID. So whatever element we click, the prev will be set to that element's ID. So if this condition is not true, that means we previously clicked something, for example this one, and then we have clicked, for example, this one. So now we need to check if they are the same. So for that, we are going to create a function called check. So we're going to say check, and we're going to pass the ID. The ID will be the new element's ID that we have clicked. So let's create that function. So let's say function check. This function will receive argument. Let's call it current, the ID of current element that we clicked, and here we're going to say if, and here we're going to say if items. So we're going to say items get the element at that index, so the current dot ID equals to, and we're going to say items get the item that we have clicked previously, so item prev.id. If they're the same, that means we have found a pair. In that case, simply set the stat of those two to correct. So we're going to say correct, and we can set it to correct as well, so correct. After that, we can again set our previous back to the -1. Okay, so here we're also going to have to say items, so items get the item at that ID, and we're going to set the stat to active, and then we're going to say set items, and we're going to set it to the new item, save it. Okay, so now let's refresh, and now if you click on this one gets flipped, and then if we click on this one, this is also flipped, and they are highlighted in green. That is because they are the same. Let's also check if they are not the same. So if they are not the same, in that case we can simply say they will have a class of wrong, and after some time we want to set the class back to set the stat back to empty string. So we're going to say set timeout. Let's say we're going to run this function after 1 second, so we're going to say 1000, and after that we can simply say, okay, before that we're also going to have to say set items, so set items, and we're going to use destructuring here also. So we're in the square bracket, we're simply going to say dash items, and we have to do the same in the if block also, so I forgot, so let's do that. So Control V, and then in the set timeout after 100 seconds, we're going to say we're going to clear the stat of them, and then again we're going to set the items to the updated items, and then we can set our prev back to -1. So save it, click on refresh, and let's try to play the game. So if you click on this one and click on this one, they are highlighted in green. That is because they are the same. If you click on this one and this one, they are also highlighted in green. If I click on this one and this one, they're not the same, so they were highlighted in red, but after some time they were flipped back. If I click on this and this again, after some time they get flipped back. So now our game is working as we want it. Okay guys, so that's all. We have successfully created a memory game using React. So I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new from this video. If so, don't forget to like and share this with your friend, and subscribe and turn on the notifications so you'll be notified when I release a new video, and I'll see you next time.